Hi, John Risper here from the Alcohol Free Shop, and welcome to the 0% Show. In this episode, I'm speaking to John Lamerton about how and why he stopped drinking. John is a best-selling author, investor, and business coach. He manages to run an ambitious lifestyle business, as well as helping to homeschool his two young children. Known to many as the king of routine, John has optimized every aspect of his life to achieve more than he ever dreamt possible without requiring superhuman effort or, as he says, natural-born talent. As part of this process, John decided to drink a bit less in November 2013, a process that quickly led him to ditch the booze for good and kick-started a revolution in his health. Last week I caught up with him to find out exactly how he did it and what help he can pass on to others.
What do I tell people? You know, how do I go to the football and not have a beer? What do I do if we're on a night out? And, you know, I've got to explain to someone why I'm not drinking. How do I explain to my best friend that I've decided to quit drinking? Yeah, many afternoons, particularly Friday afternoons, I would have been in the office feeling a bit hazy. But It's the civil service, that's expected. I didn't realise you were an alcoholic. I thought, well, am I? I don't know, because, what's your definition of alcoholic? I was drinking too much. I had issues that I wasn't happy with, and I felt, whilst I felt in control, why am I Googling or buying books on Amazon at 3 a.m. on a Saturday night, 2 bottles of red wine deep? That doesn't sound like someone who's in control.
Hi John, thanks for joining us.
Great to be here, John. Thank you for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. It's been a long time. We've been talking about doing this for a year.
Pretty much. I think it's been going on for a year. We've had a few dates in the diary and we've finally got it done. Lockdown has forced our hand.
Well, we're both just so bored and...
That sounds great. We're so bored we thought we'd actually talk to each other.
Speak to John, I suppose, yeah. How are you coping?
Not too bad. I think cabin fever's kicked in a few times. And bored. I think it's just boredom. You know me, I love my routines. So I've got my new lockdown routines. And I've kind of settled into that. And I think a lot of the issues that other people have had with lockdown, we've been ahead of the curve because we've been homeschooling our children since last year. So we haven't had to adapt to that. I've been remote working since 2002, so I haven't had to adapt to that. We've been using Zoom for, 2 years now. Haven't had to adapt to that. Social distancing, well, I've been doing that for years. I don't like people. I hate crowds already. So, for me, it's I've settled into a routine. It's not been too bad. It's just the boredom of I physically can't go out, or if I can, I go for my nightly dog walk. And I've explored every street around within a 2-mile circumference of my house, because obviously I have to start here, and I've walked 2 miles in that direction, 2 miles in that direction, and we've taken every little turn along the way. Just have some variety. I think that's what I've been lacking, is the variety of, shall we go to the beach? Shall we go to the city centre? Shall I fancy meeting up for a coffee? Can't do any of that.
Well, I mean, I've got the beach just here. It's I think it's 4 kilometres technically, but I can see it.
Yeah.
I can't go. Even now, where here in Spain, they've relaxed lockdown a bit, but you still can't go. You can go within 1 kilometre of where you live for a walk. And at the moment, I'm not bothering because it is packed with people. Everyone's just jumped out in one go. But if you live near the beach, you're okay. You can go in it. But I can still only just look at it.
It's hard. Look, but you can't touch.
Yeah. But it's a bit worse actually from the daughter, because she's 2.5. She doesn't know. And she just go to the beach. Sorry.
Not allowed.
Sticking with childhood, what sort of childhood did you have? I read in, I think it's in Routine Machine, you mentioned your mum worked in a sewing factory and your dad was an electrician.
That's right,
so sort of standards working class background?
Yeah, I think they were aspirational. I think my dad was certainly the first of his family to own his own house. He was very, very proud of that.
They must have been pleased when you got a sensible job at the civil service.
Oh, they loved it. They loved it. They wanted more for me than they had, and I think a lot of parents have the same. And my parents ended up actually moving house when I was 9, so that we were in the catchment area for a better secondary school for me, because the one we were in was on the outskirts of quite a rough area, and we could move to a better area. So they actually moved, some expense to a better school so that I would go to school, get good grades, go to university. That was the plan, was that I was going to be the first Lamerton to go to university. That ended up not happening. And it was actually my niece, Eloise, who ended up with that accolade of being the first Lamerton to go to uni. But that's what my parents wanted, was because that's what they understood. My dad was born in 41. So, he's 80 here. So what he grew up with was, well, the harder you work and the more you study and the better qualifications you have, the better job you will get. And if you get a nice, safe, secure job, you'll never lose your job. You'll have a job for life and a nice pension to retire on.
That's why I said, obviously being the first to go to university is great for any family when that happens. But to get a job, certainly back in those days when it was a job for life, maybe not so much these days. But a job in the civil service, perfect. Work hard. Yeah, work hard, progress up, become manager, retire with a nice pension.
Yeah,
sorted.
Alex, I was 17 when I joined the civil service. I managed to leapfrog a couple of junior positions by taking a summer job at the local job centre. This was between GCSEs and planned A-levels. And I took a summer job. Literally, I went into the job centre every day and I asked the lady on the front desk, have you got any jobs? I'm looking for a summer job. I'll do anything. I want to do this. What have you got? And I just went in there every single day. And eventually she got to know me. And it was just like, oh, yeah, morning, John. No, there's nothing in today. Morning, John. Oh, yeah, I've got this one. Yeah, put your application in. Bless her, she'd sit down with me and work on my CV, work on my cover letter. And eventually she said, well, there's no jobs today, but we've got a YTS scheme. Do you fancy coming in and doing this? It's only, you can just do it for the summer if you want. And it paid £29.50 per week for a full-time, 40 hours a week job. So it's pretty crap, 50p an hour, pretty much I was earning. And I said, yeah, okay, why not? So the plan was I was going to do maybe 10 weeks because I was on study leave. So I'd finished the year early because I'd done my exams. So 10 weeks, I'm going to do this. I'm going to earn 70 quid or something, and I said, yeah, I'm going to do that. And they started me working on the jobs that were coming in. So employers would send in their requirements. We would type them up literally on a computer, print them off on a card and put them in the window to say, cleaning required, previous experience necessary, paying £3 an hour, apply, by ringing this telephone number. Every single job said experience essential, experience necessary. We're looking for people with experience. And I said to my supervisor at one point, where are all the descriptions that say I need A-levels? And went, well, they're not looking for qualifications, they're looking for experience. Mm-hmm. And I went, oh, okay, why am I going back to school to get my A-levels when employers don't want A-levels, employers want experience? So I decided not to go back to school and to stick at my £29.50 a week YTS scheme, which my parents weren't too happy with because the plan wasn't for me to quit school after my GCSEs and take a £29.50 a week job. But I was adamant, and it's the first time I think I've really pushed back against my parents and said, no, I've seen the evidence. This is what employers want. You're telling me I need to go to school, 2 more years of A-levels, then university, 4 years at uni, then go out and magically get a job. If I want to be a doctor, lawyer, architect, yes, that's the path I want. I'm looking for an office job, and here are the vacancies. Experience essential, experience absolute must. There's nothing on it. You must have GCSE English and Maths A to C. I've got that, so I don't need A levels. And it was the first time I've really pushed back against them. And that just ended up actually shortcutting things, because I stuck at my £29.50 a week YTS job. 9 months later, a vacancy came up within the benefits agency, so again, civil service, and the lady who was now my supervisor and my YTS leader said, she gave me a heads up and said, this is going to be in the paper next Wednesday. Let me work through your covering letter. Let me work through your application form. Let me tell you what they're looking for. And she just gave me the blueprint for this is what they're looking for from this job, because she knows, she can pick up the phone and speak to the person who's doing the hiring. And I was coached through the interview as well. So she said, this is what you can expect through the interview. This is what they're going to be looking for. This is how you need to answer this question. And I can't remember the exact numbers now, but there was something like 20 jobs available and 1,500 people interviewed for it. So the chances of me getting it were like none. But I got it, and I was 17. And most people who were at that grade were 30. And I mean, the majority of people that were in that grade were actually, they've been in the civil service for 30 years, and they were in their 50s and 60s and nearing retirement.
That must have made you popular.
Exactly, but most of the other guys were filing papers and doing photocopying.
Yeah,
I'm making actual decisions and talking to customers and actually have some responsibility there. So it's great to be able to just shortcut that.
And then you jacked it all in.
I did, yeah. They changed the rules somewhat. So I used to love my job. And in early 2000, I believe it was, they reclassified my job and said that I was no longer qualified to do the job that I'd been doing for 2 years. I ended up moving to a different department within the civil service and immediately, and I mean immediately, hated it. And I just knew straight away, I've come from doing something I absolutely love to doing something I absolutely hate. And I launched my first business, I think it was week 3 of my induction training in my new job. Because I was that adamant, I'm not going to stick it here. There's no way I can do, because at the time I would have been 22.
Yep.
Civil servants can retire at 60. So great, I've only got 38 years to go. But it was that was the catalyst for ultimately starting my first business. Was okay, I need to do something else, because I cannot face 38 more years of this. Yeah, I think it took me 18 months to get out, because I knew nothing. I didn't know anything about business. My first business was an internet marketing business when I knew nothing about running a business. I knew nothing about marketing, and I didn't have access to the internet. So other than those 3 small little hurdles, I was golden.
You're very similar to me. Virtually no one in my family, certainly no one in my immediate family, ran a business. And this is not an attack on people who we're all born where we're born. We can't help it, whether you're born into privilege or not. But lots of people, your dad's in business, or your mum, or your brother. I didn't have that, and you didn't have that. So you don't know where to start, do you? Except you think, I want to start, I'll find out. And then you've got everyone else saying, get a normal job. Or in your case, stick with the civil service. Don't be stupid. Presumably you found that. Was that the case?
Oh, definitely. I think, everyone knew I wasn't happy in the civil service at that point. But I think when I got to the stage whereby I was earning enough money from the business that I could go part-time at the civil service, it was kind of oh, is that a good idea? Is that I don't know if you're making the right decision there. I said, well, ultimately, I'm going part-time. I can always increase my hours. It's fine. I can always transfer to another department. That's fine. Problem was, when I went part-time in the day job, I had more time to devote to the business, and all of a sudden, the hockey stick growth happened. And I suddenly found that it was costing me money to go to work. So I made the decision, and this would have been early November. Yeah, early November 2001. And ironically, it was the last conversation I had with my sister. She died in November 2001. It was one of the last conversations I ever had with her. I told her I'm going to quit. I'm going to leave my job. I'm going to do this internet thing full time. And she was just so concerned for me. She was like, "Are you sure you're doing the right thing here? Because you've been in the civil service for 6.5 years now. You've got a promotion coming up. If you keep your nose clean and work hard, by the time you're 40, you'll be at this level. And why would you throw that away? And your pension fund's building up, and why would you give away the safety and security to chase this unknown thing?" And it was one of the last conversations I had with her, and I just remember the concern she had, and I know that a lot of that was coming from my parents as well, who didn't necessarily, after the conversation we'd had about the YTS scheme, I don't think they were as keen to. They trusted me a little bit more because they'd seen that actually,
you've been
he isn't
sensible.
making rash decisions here. He has thought things through.
Mm-hmm.
So ironically, I ended up having compassionate leave from the civil service for I think 2 weeks after Lynn died, and then I would have gone back in. Yeah, it was literally, I think the first day I went back after compassionate leave with my resignation letter, like, "Thank you for letting me have 2 weeks unpaid. I'm quitting." And I think they thought that I was quitting because of that. It was the whole, life's too short thing, but
of course,
I would have quit anyway. It just really fell into place of like, well, actually, I'd already made my mind up, but that accelerated my decision that, well, actually, Lynn had all these plans of stuff she was going to do. She was going to take the kids to Disneyland. She was going to move to this house. She was going to get this car. She was going to start this business. She had all these plans that she was going to do one day. And then one night she went to sleep and just didn't wake up. And you just think, well, that could be me. That could very easily have been.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
Why don't I do this now? Why don't I just? Because if it doesn't work out, I can apply for a job with the civil service and say, "Oh, I've been a civil servant for the last 6 years. I went and tried something. It didn't work."
Did your drinking start when you were at the civil service? I mean, was there a culture of drinking there, or were you sort of in and out with your friends?
A little bit. I mean, it wasn't too much. It was quite often, should we go to the pub for lunch? And there was literally a pub next door. And sometimes, should we just go in? And it was often a Friday thing. Friday, this pub was packed.
It's alien to people now, isn't it? The idea that you would go for a few pints on your lunch break and then go back to work.
There was one
You'd be
guy,
sacked.
One of the older guard in the civil service did get pulled for drink driving. Yeah, many afternoons, particularly Friday afternoons, I would have been in the office feeling a bit hazy. But it's the civil service, that's expected.
it was basically everywhere. I mean, that's how life used to be.
Yeah.
It depends. I mean, I'm sure your mum in the factory wasn't so
probably not. No.
Pissed. But in your new book, Routine Machine, you mentioned 5 magic ingredients for success. Do you want to describe what they are and how they may fit in with giving up alcohol?
Yeah, definitely. So these magic ingredients, and I hate the term magic ingredients. You can call them pillars, you can call them stepping stones, you can call them whatever you want. I can't think of a better name for them. But when I look at anything I've achieved in my life that I'm proud of, normally, majority of these 5 ingredients are there. And I think there's an order to them as well. So the first of the ingredients is goals. So that is setting a target, something you want to achieve. The second ingredient is desire. So you've got to really want it. The third ingredient is knowledge. You've got to know What do I need to do? What are the blueprints for success? Number 4 is your environment. So who you hang around with, the books you read, the podcasts you listen to. And the final ingredient, which everybody forgets to do, is action. You've actually got to, at some point, get off your arse and do something about it. And I think everything I've done that I'm really, really proud of over the last few years, I've stacked up at least 4 of those 5. And in many cases, I've hit the 5 and I've optimized particularly elements of those 5.
I was looking at this last night. I was thinking that fits in perfectly with giving up drinking.
Yeah.
And it fits in probably with everything, but with drinking. Is that how you approached giving up drinking when you decided you need to stop? Or
yeah, I think absolutely. I probably didn't start with the go, which you normally would. I think what has to come first with that decision is the desire. My decision was, I think I'm ready to start cutting down. I had a pivotal moment one Saturday night whereby I'd opened a bottle of fairly decent red wine. It wasn't great, it wasn't cheap, but it wasn't a good bottle of red wine. And I drank the whole bottle to myself and then thought, well, I really didn't enjoy that. I'd better open another bottle just so I finish on a high. That bottle wasn't any better. I ended up finishing that bottle as well, at which point I then felt very, very sorry for myself and thought, why the hell have I just drunk 2 bottles of shit red wine for no reason other than it's Saturday night? So I thought, do you know what? I'm fed up of this. I'm going to cut down. I'm going to just be a social drinker, or I'm just going to drink once or twice a month. I'm fed up of just going Friday night, Saturday night, every time I go to the football, every time I go out for a drink, every time I go to the theatre, every time we go to a gig. It's like, I'm fed up with that expectation. I'm going to cut down a bit. So I ended up literally that night on Amazon, drunken purchase. And I looked on Amazon, books on cutting down on drinking, not giving up, cutting down. And I bought 2 books. And the first book I bought, I'd never read. I didn't even pick it up. For some reason I bought it, it didn't appeal. And then there was another book which had a bright pink cover, and it was called Kick the Drink Easily. Jason Bale was the author. And it attracted me. I thought, well, actually, that looks like a better book. So I bought that one. Next afternoon, I'm on the sofa with a hangover, reading this book, and suddenly decided I don't want to cut down. I actually don't fancy drinking anymore. It like reprogrammed me and all my thinking around drink from, drinking's what you do, drinking's normal, to just drinking is just a drug. It's just a drug. Mm-hmm. And just like I don't do cocaine and I don't do heroin and I don't smoke cannabis, it's like, well, I don't drink. It's like, well, that's easy. And it just
reframing into in your mind of it's not alcohol, or it is alcohol, but it's not just alcohol, it's a drug.
I think the minute I thought of it in those terms of, well, why do I like, why do I drink this? Well, what is it? It's ethanol mixed with fruit so that it doesn't taste horrible. Okay, when you think of it in those terms, it's not very appealing. The one thing I'd settled into, I had a few, not drinking because of kids and things like that, settled into a routine of, well, I'll just have some red wine, I'll just have some Guinness. Those were the only drinks I actually liked, because the minute I stopped drinking and I picked up a beer, I was like, oh, well, that tastes horrible. And then I'd have rum and Coke. It's like, oh, I don't like that anymore. And the minute I stopped these drinks, I realised that they don't actually taste very nice. And I'm drinking things I don't actually like the taste of because it's Saturday night. And that's what I should do on a Saturday night. Mm-hmm. And the minute I got that reframe was, but you don't have to do that, Like, okay, that makes sense.
I mean, going back to the environment, that's one of the, I'm speaking personally, one of the things when you stop drinking, you need to get away. I hate to say from certain people, because that's not strictly true, but certainly in certain environments. Personally, when I stopped, I didn't go to the pub for quite some time. It took me a while to be comfortable to do that. And there's a chance of losing some friends. Although I always say most friends in the pub are pub friends, not actually friends. But did you have that problem?
Oh, absolutely. That of those 5 ingredients, that was the hardest one for me to get right, because it was the one I was most worried about, and it was probably the one that kept me drinking longer than I really wanted to. Because in the back of my mind was, what do I tell people? You know, how do I go to the football and not have a beer? What do I do if we're on a night out? And, you know, I've got to explain to someone why I'm not drinking. How do I explain to my best friend that I've decided to quit drinking? And that was the hardest part for me, was actually going to those around me who were ultimately very supportive. You know, they absolutely had my back. But I still had that, as you said, going to the pub. I think I'd by that point, we weren't that frequent pub goers. And I think the first time I went to the pub was a big deal for me. I thought, all right, here we go. Gene yourself up, John. My first trip to the pub was I think it was a Sunday evening, but it was a karaoke event. And I'd been there before, very, very boozy event, lots to drink, lots of singing. And I went there and I drank water. I think I had a couple of appetizers at the start of the day. Soon got fed up of fruit juices and appetizer, that I can tell you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I moved on to just water, and it was like I'd have water, and I was really dreading it because I thought, oh my God, I'm not going to enjoy myself. I'm not going to be able to partake. And after about 90 minutes to 2 hours, I started to enjoy it, and it was fine. I did a couple of songs at karaoke, and it was fine. And then everyone around me suddenly got a bit louder, and they started shouting at me, and they started telling me the same thing that they told me 10 minutes
5
before.
times.
They started grabbing me a bit more than they were before. And it was just, my God, is this what people are like? Is this? And it was like, is that what I'm like? Am I like that when I drink?
Yeah. It's an eye-opener. Absolutely. Yeah.
It was. I felt in that moment, I felt like Neo in The Matrix when he's taken that blue pill, and he's like, my God, this is what it's really like. You remember the arms around the shoulders and the sing-alongs, and oh, it's great. And you don't remember actually you're a bit of a prat when you're out.
Well, I mean, the one that always gets me, because I know you're an ex-smoker as well, is when we used to smoke and drink as well, and when you could smoke anywhere. The amount of times that you would brush against someone with your cigarette, at a function or a club or whatever. Oh, sorry. And normally that person would be really rightly pissed off. And you'd just go, oh, sorry, as if it was a perfectly normal thing to do. And same with drink. We just act, not always, but we act stupidly sometimes. But because everyone else is in the same level, more or less, you don't notice. Once you walk in there sober, you're just like, this is nuts. This is really crazy.
Exactly, yeah. And it's having to change that. I think that's, one of the key things for me was changing the environment. I think, so I quit at the start of November 2013, and I think I'd been to my last gig. This was a big thing for me before, was I couldn't go to a gig. I love my music. I love live music. But I could not go to a gig and not drink. So perfect example of this would have been probably about 2 years before. There was a band I wanted to see. Now, I'm based in Plymouth, and this band were playing in Torquay, which is about 35 miles away. Not served very well by public transport. I can get there, but I can't get back by public transport.
Yep.
So I would have to drive to and from the gig. Therefore, I chose not to go to the gig. I chose not to see a band that I really wanted to see because I have to drive.
Well, I once saw B.B. King, who was a hero of mine, and I literally do not remember the concert at all.
Yeah.
I had to ask my ex-wife, and she said, no, you hated it. Oh, did you say it like that? I don't even remember now what she said, but I don't remember. I know I went. I never saw him, but stupid. Whereas actually a week after I stopped drinking, I went to see James Brown.
Oh, wow.
Sober. And, the idea of going to see James Brown sober a week before that would have been horrendous. Yeah, I just couldn't imagine it. But I went and I stood up and I won't say I danced because I don't dance. But, I stood up and moved. And it was so liberating. It really was. It was like, wow, I can do this. Yeah.
One of the things, I think the last gig I went to as a drinker was Arctic Monkeys in Cardiff, and I had a great time. 8 pints in, I spent most of the gig either in the queue for the bar or the queue for the toilets.
Yeah.
But as far as I'm concerned, I had a great time. Could I tell you any of the set list? No, couldn't tell you that. What I love now, I did an Arctic Monkeys gig actually last year, and I loved it because I drove there. I parked like right outside. I got straight in because I didn't need to go and have a drink first. And when I get in there, everybody is rammed. Obviously, this was pre-lockdown. Everybody's just rammed. It's a sea of people, and there's, as you would expect, probably a 45-plus minute queue for the bar. Or you can go to one of the kiosks there and get a bottle of water or a bottle of Coke. So I go over to the kiosk, 2 bottles of water, please. Thank you very much. I take my bottles of water with the caps on, straight in, front row. And it's like, this is brilliant. No queue for the bar.
Yep.
I've got my drinks with me all night. They've got a nice lid I can screw on, so I haven't got to down pints because I've got to carry 5 back from the bar because otherwise I've got to queue again. And then at the end of the night, I can jump in my car and drive home, having full recollection of that brilliant gig that I spent all of it actually watching the band.
When you told your friends and your family that you were stopping drinking, were you worried about their reaction in terms of what they think of you? I mean, did they think you're an alcoholic? Yeah. Do you consider yourself an alcoholic, or just someone who wanted to stop because it was holding back what you wanted to do?
Yeah, I think this was one of my fears about telling people was, what are people going to think? Because my experience of at this point in 2013, my experience of stopping drinking was what I'd seen on TV, which is you only stop drinking when someone does an intervention and says you're an alcoholic and you need to deal with this problem. And I thought, well,
absolutely.
But that's not me. I just fancy, I said I originally fancied drinking a bit less and then decided, do you know what, actually I don't want to drink. I've not seen that TV program. I've not seen this play out. In terms of following the blueprint, there kind of isn't one. So I was really worried. And I mentioned, obviously, in Routine Machine that I used this line several times. I don't feel like drinking at the moment. And that was complete bollocks. It was the truth was, I've decided to quit drinking. But I know if I say to, my best friend or my parents or my next door neighbours, I've decided to stop drinking, they're like, oh, is there a problem? Oh, I didn't realise you were an alcoholic. Like, well, am I? I don't know, because, what's your definition of alcoholic? I was drinking too much. I had issues that I wasn't happy with, and I felt, whilst I felt in control, why am I Googling or buying books on Amazon at 3 a.m. on a Saturday night, 2 bottles of red wine deep? That doesn't sound like someone who's in control. So, I in the back of my mind, there's this narrative of, well, perhaps you have got a problem. Perhaps you do need to deal with this. But more than that, I was worried about what are people going to say. So I just trotted out that line that I don't feel like drinking at the moment. And that's the first line I remember using on Jason, my business partner, which was, I think, the week after. It might have been a week or 2 weeks after I decided I'm not going to drink anymore. The first weekend was fine because I sat at home and I drank. I moved to Cherry Coke. That was my go-to drink of a Saturday night. And the week after that, we were at a conference. And conferences were very much, you get there the day before, you head to the bar, you have lots to drink, you wake up the next day with a hangover and try and actually get some value out of the conference. And so we arrived at the bar. It was up in Basingstoke, the rock and roll capital of the UK. And I went to the bar, came back, pint of lager for Jace, sparkling water for me. And he just took one look at the glass, one look at me, and went, "What the are you doing? What's going on here?" And I went, and I played through this in my mind because I knew I wasn't going to drink. And all the drive up there, which is like a 3.5 hour drive, I'm thinking, what am I going to say to Jason? How am I going to explain this to him? Do I be honest with him? Do I tell him I've read a book And because that sounds a bit flaky and a bit, oh, he's a man's man. He's my drinking buddy. He's like, what do you mean you've read a book and now you don't fancy drinking? It's like, no, so I'm just going to say, I just don't feel like it. And that seemed to me to be, I'm feeling a bit dodgy, stomach's playing up, just don't feel like it. And then I trot out the old, I'm driving tonight. And eventually I got to the stage where I think I started saying, I think I'm going to stop drinking. And then, because then I was able to say, well, actually, do you know what? I haven't had a drink for 4 weeks and I'm feeling better. We said before about there was the feedback loops about, actually.
Totally,
once I've seen a little bit of progress, I was like, actually, I haven't had a drink for a few weeks. And actually, do you know what? My belt's feeling a bit looser now. I feel like I might have lost a bit of weight. There's getting some colour in my eyes. And go on, I think I might see this through. And I almost presented it as a challenge. Christmas was coming up. And certainly for me, that was the big challenge, because I said to myself, do you know what? This hasn't been very hard so far. I found it quite easy to just have a cherry Coke instead of a Guinness or instead of a red wine because it tastes better. But I said...
we could argue about that one, but okay.
Well, trust me, the cherry Coke didn't last long. The cherry Coke lasted about 2 months. Before I replaced that with like broccoli and celery juice, but that's a whole nother story. But I just thought, if I can make it through Christmas and New Year, those are the two big challenges that I'm going to face in my newbie journey as a non-drinker. And I think Christmas Day was the catalyst for me, where I woke up on Christmas Day for the first time in probably 20 years without a hangover. And I felt bright as a daisy and really enjoyed Christmas Day. And then thought, well, that was a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. And I mean, you mentioned earlier about the Christmas meal. What do we do? Well, I just had a lemonade. I had a wine glass. And I had, instead of everyone else had sparkling white wine in it, I had lemonade. And that was easy. That was actually quite simple. New Year's Eve. What am I going to do New Year's Eve? I stuck to apple ties. It was bloody sickly by the end of it, but it wasn't hard. And having the environment of a supportive base around me, of friends and family who didn't say, oh, go on, just have the one won't hurt you.
I was lucky in that sense as well. My dad, because I was very clearly an alcoholic, no question. And I think the whole definition is a very personal one anyway. It's not for me to say you are or aren't, or you to say I am or aren't. But I know I was. And my parents knew that without even discussing it, So when I told them, my dad, he just hugged me and said, congratulations. That's right, I told him I was going to AA. And it was great. My mum was a bit more reserved because she didn't like the A word, alcoholic. Okay. She was still thinking of, people in the gutter and so on. But she was pleased that I'd made the decision. She just didn't like the fact I used that word. Obviously, 16 years later, I think she's over that now, just about. But presumably you had to lose some friends, though. People who were, in the pub.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I talked about it in my first book, Big Ideas for Small Businesses. I talked about, there's a group of people who I used to hang around with, like, probably 20 years ago now. And they were very much, I think you used the term just now, pub mates, pub friends. And that was them. It was as long as I was there to share the cab fare home, or to go have some pizza, or to buy the next round, then we were best mates ever. But if I'd actually had a tough day at work, or split up with a girlfriend or something, and wanted an arm around the shoulder, or just let's actually be proper mates here and look out for each other. Screw that. Let's go to the pub. Let's go to the pub, play some pool. Play some darts.
The answer to everything.
Get a kebab on the way home. That is the answer to everything. All of life's problems can be solved by a game of pool and a kebab on the way home. Apart from the fact you're not, because that's kind of bottling things up. But those guys. I talked about it. This was how I framed the environment part of the magic ingredients, was these guys, because it was my choice. I chose to hang around with them. I chose, these are my mates. I love these guys. They're brilliant. But ultimately, those guys ruined my life at that time. I very nearly got sacked by the civil service, turning up late, turning up still drunk at 9 o'clock in the morning because I've been out night clubbing, because everyone knows that the best nightclubs are to be found on a Tuesday evening at 3 a.m. That is the best time to go clubbing. Just before you've got a 9 o'clock team meeting on a Wednesday morning. Oh, fantastic time for those sort of things. I ended up losing, so I was engaged to a girl, we were going to get married, ended up screwing that up. And it all came down to the people I was hanging around with. I mean, if you've been in the entrepreneurial world at any point, you've done any personal development, you've heard the Jim Rohn saying about you are the average of the 5 people you hang around with. Well, if I looked around at those 5, oh my God, what a bunch of losers. And then if I looked in the mirror, oh, look, I'm just exactly the same, because that was...
I was going to say that because, you're right. You were what they were, but they were also what you were. You were part of that gang. A minute ago, you just said, they almost got me sacked. And I know what you mean, but you almost got yourself sacked.
Exactly, yeah.
By hanging around with them.
I need to accept responsibility for that.
Yes,
ultimately, it's my actions. You can blame peer pressure all you like, but ultimately, I chose to hang out. When they rang up on a Tuesday evening, John, do you fancy a few beers? Then I have the choice to say, no, I've got 9 o'clock meeting tomorrow. I've got to prep for this. But I chose to say, screw it. Let's go.
Yeah, it's easier to say yes than it is no. Yeah. But that's the point. You did eventually say no. And I don't know whether any of the others did, but you did. And, things have changed massively. I mean, like you say, it's a completely, not another subject, but a wider subject. But I know apart from stopping drinking, you also completely changed your health regime.
Yeah.
You didn't just stop drinking, which unfortunately I'm a bit guilty of. We discussed recently, still eating cakes and sweets and so on. But you've gone full on. You're Mr. Fitness, aren't you?
I don't know about Mr. Fitness, Mr. Motivator, getting the skin tight leotard or whatever. But drinking was the catalyst for it. Or quitting drinking was the catalyst. So pre-2013, I got into better shape. And it's actually very funny because I've shared photos of me from 2005, 6, 7, and I am a good 5 stone heavier than I am now. I mean, you said you had to look twice to see that it actually was me.
I'm going to put them up on this video, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, absolutely fine, yeah.
No, you're right. That first one you posted, honestly, I wasn't sure it was you. I really wasn't. I had to look, and eventually I was like, yeah, that is John.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So I started sorting myself out a bit once the kids arrived, or just before the kids arrived. We had some fertility issues, so I needed to get myself into shape. So kind of some of the ready meals got kicked to the curb. Started eating a bit fresh. I still didn't like vegetables. Still didn't really eat much fruit. I went to the gym a couple of times a week, and I did some running. And I dropped, a stone and a half, 2 stone. I remember thinking I'd love to be like 14 and a half stone. That's my where I'd like to be. And that's probably where I was, or not far off that, when I quit drinking. And it was about 6 months ago. I looked at an old, you get these Facebook memories come up. And this photo of me from October 2013 came up. So the month before I quit drinking. Now, in my mind, I'm like, I was still quite fit then. And I looked at it, I thought, my God, the chins, the cheeks, where's my cheekbones gone? Because it just looked like someone had stuck a air hose in me and inflated me a little bit. So drinking was the catalyst, because when I did that in the November, I thought, right, I'll stop drinking. That's for my purposes to actually get away from the habits and the routines that I'm not happy with here. Of course, what happens when you stop drinking is you also stop having the late night cereal attacks. That my thing was cereal. I'd have a drink, I'd get a bowl of cereal, and then I'd suddenly feel less drunk, so I'd have some more to drink, and then I'd grab some cheese. And I'd maybe just do some toast whilst I'm at it. And it was the late night snacking. And suddenly, another half a stone disappeared before Christmas. And I thought, do you know what? I'm going to really have a go at this. And that book that I'd read, Jason Vale book on stopping drinking, that's not what Jason Vale is famous for. Jason Vale is famous for juicing, and particularly like vegetables, celery, broccoli, carrots, all chucked through a juicer, and you drink that. And I thought, well, I've read one of his books. It really, it had, no word of a lie, changed my life. I thought, you know what, I'm going to pick up one of his juicing books. So over Christmas, I read one of his juicing books, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to do this. New Year's Day, new year, new me. I'm going to get myself a juicer. I'm going to juice. So I made one change. I replaced my lunch. So my lunch used to be beans on toast or poached egg on toast. That was my choice. I'm a creature of habit, a man of routine. What can I say? And I replaced this one lunch with a green smoothie. So a juice. So this juice was, I'm trying to remember now, because I don't actually have this anymore, but apple, pineapple, broccoli, cucumber, celery, ginger, lime, and about 2 other ingredients. So basically, I was having 10 of my 5 a day for lunch. And I started that in the beginning of January. And by the end of March, I'd lost 2 stone just by replacing my lunch with a juice. And I felt I was sleeping better. I was having so much energy. And all of a sudden, I was like, ooh, do you know what? I really like this. Because when you drop like 2 trouser sizes in 2 months and you're starting to stack up these gains. So all of a sudden I'm not drinking. Now all of a sudden I'm juicing. Then all of a sudden, well, what if I put an extra gym session in?
Yeah, what next now?
I'm building muscle. Yeah. And I started thinking, well, do you know what? I'm going to start running. I'm going to do a 10K. So actually, I'm just going to scoot back here, because here, I always keep this down because this reminds me of what I achieved. And that's my medal from the Plymouth 10K, which was on the 2nd of November, 2014, the 1-year anniversary of my stopping drinking. So I was adamant. So that's...
You see, you did all the things that I promised I was going to do. When I stopped, I was going to get fit. I was going to start running. I did do some years later, but not for that long. I was going to go mountain climbing, all sorts. And didn't quite work out.
Life gets in the way, doesn't it? But I think
there was other things to do.
Them up. So it was one thing on top of the other. And it wasn't, again, you can't look at the before and after picture and say, oh, yeah, today I am going, imagine someone who's listening to this podcast decides, right, today's the day I am going to quit smoking, give up drinking, start juicing, run a marathon, and start lifting weights. Good luck, you will last a week.
Absolutely.
It's
that was it. I mean,
one thing.
Did you stop smoking before drinking?
Yeah, so I stopped smoking in 2006.
Right, so quite a few
which
years
is what led to the weight gain.
Yeah, that can happen. Yeah, I think I stopped about a year or 2 before. I can't remember exactly, but I know it was before.
Yeah.
But you're right. If I'd have thought of, in fact, I used it as an excuse. I can't stop smoking because I want to stop drinking, and I can't stop drinking and smoking. And any excuse. It's always the case. You just mentioned January to March losing 2 trouser sizes. 90 days. I know 90 days is a big thing to you in a lot of what you do. You like to plan 90-day routines and habits. Is that something which you did with drink, or did it just sort of happen naturally like that?
I think I probably initially said I treated it probably as a 90-day goal, because I thought, well, I've got, I'm quitting at the start of November. So November and December were my 2 months that I thought, if I can do this, I've got it cracked. Because I've honestly felt that when I got to the 1st of January and I'd made it through Christmas and I'd made it through New Year's Eve, I've done it. As far as I was concerned, I've done it. I mean, yes, there were still challenging times. At that point, I probably still had to go to my first gig where I wasn't drinking, or my first wedding where I wasn't drinking. There's always going to be firsts.
Yeah.
But I felt that I'd made it through my biggest challenge. And the minute I made it through my biggest challenge, I thought, do you know what? That's it. I'm done. And in a way, that's the entrepreneur in me to just go, right, that's done. What's next? What's my next challenge? But yeah, for me, 90 days it's a little bit of a magic. We've got a lot of magic going on today, haven't we? It's a little bit, it's what I call the Goldilocks of kind of planning, because lots of people make this year I'm going to do whatever, and then by the time they get 5 months in, they've kind of forgotten that they had this big target, because it's too big and it's too scary. Running that 10K, if you'd said to me on the day I'm quitting drinking, are you going to run a 10K next year? No, I'm not. That'd be stupid. But first of all, let's get the diet cracked, so that, well, actually, let's remove the booze first, then let's get the diet cracked, then let's get some generic gym cardio cracked, then let's get the sleep cracked. Right, now I can start running. Now that I haven't got, my argument about running always used to be, I can't run, I've got bad knees. Well, all of a sudden you can take 3 stone off and I don't have bad knees anymore. Yep. And it's, 90 days is that, what I call the Goldilocks of goal setting, because it's small enough, it's short enough period of time that you can, it seems achievable, but it's long enough that you can do something of value, actually worthwhile.
Yes. Well, it's been lovely talking to you, John. Thanks for coming on. Just to finish off, have you got any particular advice for people who want to either cut down or stop?
I think, the first thing is you can try these things. So I ultimately tried not drinking. I dressed it up as I don't feel like drinking at the moment. So if you want to pretend that you've got a dodgy stomach, or pretend that you're driving this weekend, then try a weekend without it. See how you feel. That was my biggest concern, was committing and saying, from this day forth, here is my flag in the ground. I am a non-drinker. I found that very, very hard to come out and say that from day one. So if you are thinking that you might want to stop, or you might want to cut down, try a weekend off. Try going to, if it's, for me it was a gig. Try going to a gig and just drinking water and driving. Just try going to a wedding and saying, I'm on antibiotics. Sorry, I've got to have lemonade. See how you get on. If you absolutely hate it and you really, really need a drink, you can go back to it. But try it. Try before you buy.
Absolutely. You've got 2 books out at the moment. We discussed before. I've read one. I need to read the other. Big Ideas for Small Business, which I have read. Brilliant book. Probably, as the title suggests, more suitable in general for people with small businesses than general life lessons. But there are life lessons there as well. But Routine Machine is definitely more for a wider audience, isn't it? It's business focused, perhaps, but it has wider life lessons in.
Absolutely. If you're a small business owner, then obviously Big Ideas for Small Businesses makes perfect sense. Routine Machine, we do talk about some business stuff in there. So actually there is some stuff about, building up, one tactic you can use to kind of massively grow your business. But there's also stuff on there about investment, about fitness, about health, about relationships. I say that with the Routine Machine, you can use these principles to change anything in your life. If you want to make more money, if you want to become a better investor, if you want to lose 5 stone in weight, or you want to improve your golf swing, then you can apply these principles. If you want to be a better parent to your child, a better husband to your wife, you can apply these principles to almost any aspect of your life. I've done it with parenting, with health, with fitness, with business, with investing, with every single aspect of my life. And there's nothing that I found yet that I can't stick a routine on and actually optimize some aspect of it to actually improve it.
Your books are available in print, on Audible, and on Kindle. I definitely need to read Routine Machine, that's for sure. Quite a few of the things you said there definitely apply to me. Thanks for coming on, and speak to you soon.
Definitely. Thank you, John.